we may be seated. And it's my honor to welcome Dr. Professor Yoram Cohen to our bima to speak to us about anti-Semitism on campus and to share his expertise with his community. Please.
I may be a professor at UCLA, but I take orders from my wife. So, that's right, a good professor. So, well, first I thought that we would do it later, but it's an honor, to stand in front of you here and to discuss, an uneasy topic of anti-Semitism at university campuses. So I thought a lot about what am I going to say and how am I going to talk to you about it. And I will specifically, draw on my personal experience at UCLA, where I've been for about 42 years, and interactions with various institutions over the years, and experience in various, countries, including in the Middle East, the Gulf states, and different groups that I've worked with. So what I have to say is that all the previous times that I stood before our Jewish community, specifically here at Dutch Shalom, were during, really periods and events of sheer joy. This is where my daughter and my son were bat and bar mitzvah, and in the hall, right behind this division here, we got married, my wife and I, and that's where I swear that I will do everything that she tells me to do. Okay. So, I thought that my comments, will be divided into a number of sections. First, a brief history. And that is, why am I even here talking to you, aside from the fact that I'm at UCLA? What are some of the faculty actions that we have taken at UCLA, the Jewish and Israeli faculty? And the issue of information dissemination, facts, disinformation, and essentially pure lies, okay? And in closure, I will, tell you about some of the things that I have done directly and also addressing the UC regents and touch upon really the issue of anti-Zionism, anti-Israel sentiments, and anti-Semitism and the battle, that some, have really taken in order to create a division, okay, among all those terms. So, as I mentioned, I'm a proud member of Dutch Shalom for about 42 years. I'm an Israeli, American, and a Canadian who also lived in Australia and Spain during sabbatical leaves. My home is here in Los Angeles and also in Rishon LeZion in Israel, where I spend quite a bit of time because I'm also an adjunct faculty at the University of Ben Gurion, working with colleagues at Ben Gurion and also at the Technion. At UCLA, and this is where it's odd, perhaps may seem, I'm a distinguished professor of chemical and biomolecular engineering, where I've also been at UCLA the director of the UCLA Nazarian Center for Israel Studies. So I've had the experience and the privilege to really learn about both North Campus at UCLA, which is mostly the humanities, and of course the sciences and engineering, which is in the South. I work primarily in the area of water technology, water desalination, also environmental impact assessment, issues of climate change, pollution prevention, machine learning and AI, and so on. And really the water area is what brought me into contact with people around the world, including a recent trip to Saudi Arabia at the invitation of the Saudi government. Now, I'm a seventh-generation Israeli Jewish Palestinian. And you might say, yes, 7 generations in Israel, and when I say Palestinian, I'm very serious. I still have my grandfather's Palestinian identity card, from the period of the British Mandate. And so when people ask me as to, where are you from? Who are you? Well, it depends on who asks, Sometimes I will say I'm a citizen of the world because I hold 3 passports. And if it's colleagues or others from particular part of the world, I'll say, I'm a Palestinian, I'm an Israeli Palestinian. And of course they, open their eyes and, their mouth drops and they say, what do you mean? I say, I was born in Israel and I'm a son of Palestinians. And so this is important because there is this misunderstanding that is around about what is the land of Israel, okay? And, who's been there first and so on and so forth. So I was born 4 years after, the War of Independence. Experienced my first war when I was 4 years old. Have been in Israel, during multiple, wars. And I still remember, what my fathers told me a number of times, that, son, I hope that, I know that in my time there will not be peace, but I hope that there will be peace in your time, in your lifetime. I refuse to say that to my son, okay? At least not yet. So, being at the university, and since I've been in the engineering and the sciences, I've not personally experienced, anti-Zionism or anti-Semitism. And I think in part because faculty in the sciences, work with people around the world, because we share that common, goal of understanding science, improving technology. We don't dwell on conflicts, as part of our intellectual, curiosity. So in that regard, I have worked with colleagues in Jordan, in Gaza, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. I wrote letters of support for promotions of colleagues in Jordan and in Egypt. The minister of the Interior in Saudi Arabia asked me a few months ago, or I should say his representative, to be on his board of advisors. Okay? In other words, when it gets to the sciences and technology, people understand that everyone can benefit, from it. And maybe that's a way to cross, or I should say overcome barriers. Last year, October, I was invited as a keynote speaker to the Future Desalination Conference in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And I was treated very well, received special visa, because in the Saudi consulate, when you try to get a visa, Israel doesn't appear, as one of the countries, right, on the list. But I should say that I had a very positive experience, and so I remained, very hopeful. I remained very hopeful because even years earlier, I was in communications with the Saudis. Okay, as an example, a Saudi delegation came to UCLA and wanted to talk to me about water and desalination. The interesting thing is that they asked me to give a presentation, but I was in Israel at the time. So I gave them a talk from our apartment in Rishon LeZion, while they were at UCLA. Of course, I didn't tell them where I was. So in any event, sadly, my optimism, has been, short-lived. And after October 7th, the situation at the UCLA campus has become intolerable. I'm not going to go through all the history of that because all of you have heard and read in the papers about what's going on in various academic institutions. And many Jewish students have reported harassment, intimidation, anxiety over their safety. I was appalled, to hear chants of pro-Palestinian students that were anti-Israel, anti-Jewish, with chants from the river to the sea, Palestine is Arab, swastikas that were drawn on cars, and graffiti that, basically read, hunt down Jewish vampires, right? And ugly anti-Semitic chants that I really don't want to repeat here. So I was disgusted, with student demonstration where they were hitting the piñatas of piñata of Netanyahu in there. But what's been happening at UCLA has been happening in other places around the world. Few universities have shown courage, in basically banning organization and student organizations that really promoted this type of hate against the Jewish people. And you've heard about Columbia University doing it, Brandeis University doing it, and George Washington University, and even in Florida, but there it's still sort of in the courts, my understanding. But unfortunately, most universities, administrators have been reluctant to take a strong and decisive action. The UC president, President Drake, has allocated some funding to support, and I won't report the entire thing, but basically emergency funding for emergency mental health, educational programs to better understand anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, provide viewpoint-neutral history of the Middle East. Good luck with that, right? Train UCLA staff and leaders how to navigate around the issue, focusing on freedom of expression, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Big words, but no, specific action as to how do you, basically eliminate, anti-Semitism, on campus. People have been studying anti-Semitism for decades and decades, okay? We, in my view, it's not that we need to study it, we need to remove it, okay, from our campuses. So not a single action by the UC president, and then also a letter by our own chancellor that basically said that we will stand firmly in support of our community members' First Amendment rights to free expression. I only urge Bruins to remember that passion must coexist with compassion. We have to debate ideas, but we must never attack one another. Now, I won't go through the entire letter, but then at the end he says, anyone experiencing harassment should report it through our Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. If you feel unsafe or threatened, immediately contact the UC Police Department and 911. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Gene Block. And so you see that there is an issue here with the administration, not really willing to come all the way out and stand, for those principles. So no single action that they have taken addressed the problem. So, they really have a choice. It's a critical choice. Will they protect the safety and fundamental freedom of all the students and faculty by banning, operations and activities that, we can argue, is it hate speech or is it free speech? Where is the line, okay? And I think I'm not supposed to say this, but it's like the word that begins with P. When you see it, okay, you recognize it, okay? Well, some of you are maybe too young to know. So what has the faculty done? So the faculty at UCLA, the Jewish and Israeli faculties, have been concerned about anti-Semitism that has been essentially masquerading as anti-Zionism for a long time, as if the latter is a permissible form of free speech, and vowing for the destruction of Israel is not anti-Semitism. So what have we done? under the leadership of my good friend, Professor Yuda Pearl, a world leader in computer science and in AI in particular. If you don't remember the name, he is the father of Daniel Pearl. Okay, so, and has devoted really, his life after that to fighting, anti-Semitism. So, what have we done is basically we formed a faculty forum to support the students in their activities to support Israel and bring their cases to the administration and through other avenues. And the faculty have been working with Hillel to meet with students and discuss their concern one-on-one, okay, which I and others have done to basically give them ammunition to be able to address and combat, questions and accusations that they are confronted with. And recently, the faculty forum wrote an open letter. I sent the link to our rabbi, in which the letter states UCLA faculty against terror. It was signed by the last that I looked about 350 UCLA faculty. And so those that are interested, provide you with a link to that. But the letter has been reported in the Jewish Journal, Hill, Fox News, PJ Media, and others. And I was told that NPR will also address this letter. So what were the main points in this letter? Basically, we asked the administration to denounce in the strongest possible terms any celebrations of Hamas terror attacks and killings. Okay, to take firm steps, to denounce, rallies that cross the line from free speech to incitement, to join President Biden and the European Union that characterize Hamas as a terrorist organization. We haven't seen that explicitly, reported by UC administrators. And to hold groups at UCLA accountable, for directly participating in such incitements, distributing even invitation to encourage incitement, enforcing existing UCLA policies to prohibit such behavior, and to enforce the so-called EDI program, the equity and diversity and inclusion program to fight anti-Semitism, not to just study it. Okay. And so, we wrote with the anticipation that something may be done. I didn't have high hopes. And this morning, literally, this is a fluid situation. So as I woke up this morning, I received an email that the chancellor has responded. And of course, I immediately went and read his letter, and there was no call for action. He pointed out to the initiative by the UC president that is putting some money, into studying, the problems. And that the event of the poor Benjamin Netanyahu pinata that is being, hit is under investigation, okay? The chancellor also pointed out that there was recent establishment of the research hub on anti-Semitism. It was announced on October 6th, the day before, the massacre. It was funded by $600,000 gift from the Anthony and Jean Pritzker Family Foundation. And the thought was it will counter anti-Jewish bigotry through studying the origin of anti-Semitism, the reason for it, and so on. Sadly, and the two faculty that are leading the center, and I will not, name them here, and the chancellor himself appear to subscribe to the movement that considers that it's legitimate to argue that being anti-Israel does not equate to being anti-Zionist, and that being anti-Zionist does not equate to anti-Semitism. Now, I'm not saying it just, because it's my opinion, is because I had these conversations, with at least two of those three people, okay, directly. So academics around the world are now combating and posting various open letters for and against, in defense of Israel, against Israel. And literally this morning I received, 2 emails from my colleagues from Israel to support and sign on to the open letters by the Israeli Geographical Association in response to open letters by the World Geographers, which is titled The Palestinian Statements Against Genocide for Liberation and Return, which is filled with misinformation and blatant, lies. I was also saw a letter that I was sent by the Israeli Geneticist Society, also trying to correct all the misrepresentations. In none of the letters that appear by various institutions, by various societies that are, against, Israel, and I mean mostly academic, groups, there's no mention that the charter of Hamas, calls for jihad, and that Palestine, in their view, Palestine is Islamic land, and that there is no solution for the Palestine problem except for jihad. Okay? None of them mentioned that. None of them mentioned that there are billions of dollars that have been given to Hamas, and the majority of that money went into what? Building tunnels, being armed. There are no shelters, for the population there. No infrastructure, that they invested in. But somehow, Israel, the country that is perceived as being, strong, should be able to bear, the brunt of the terrorist activities that are right across its border. So, I won't go through all of through this, but just to say that there is a movement there to basically state that Zionism and the national movement of Israel, along with the settler colonialism, is the root of the problem. That's in itself is, of course, racist, because in all those letters, they fail to basically mention that there's never was a Palestinian state. Israel did not conquer, Palestine. It did not, rule a country that existed before. So this is not new, and I'm getting towards the end here. Back in 2015, we had a few incidences at UCLA where students were retaliated against for being Jewish and a Zionist. And during that time, there was a student that took a course on Middle East, history, and he was very upset and came to see me when I was leading the Center for Israel Studies, and was upset that the instructor marked him wrong on his exam, question. There were questions about which are the basically the capitals of different countries, including Israel. So of course he put Jerusalem, and he was marked wrong. Okay. And so he was very, very upset. There was another case where students were asked to stand up and identify themselves, if they were Jewish, as if it was part of an exercise, a debate exercise. So there were things of that nature. So at that time, the regents of the University of California had convened a working group to consider the principles against intolerance. So I took, the opportunity to actually participate and make a statement, to the regents. And I would like to read this, to you, because I think that this is really the crux of the issue. So I said, I applaud the UC initiative to consider principles against intolerance. As you move forward with your deliberations, I hope that you will consider the rising, and that's in 2015, will consider the rising anti-Zionist movement and attempts to paint Zionism as separate from being a definition of the people of Israel wherever they may be. I hope that you will recognize in your deliberation that Zion refers to Israel. For the Jewish people, Zion and Israel, as appear in the Old Testament, are synonymous. Allowing anti-Zionism as a form of free speech or expression of political opposition is akin to allowing anti-Semitism. allowing the anti-Zionist movement to prosper through our UC system is to declare that the state of Israel and the people of Israel have no right to exist. I could write a long essay on the subject to explain the misconceptions and campaigns of deception that have been brewing for years on our campuses. Instead, however, I will cite the words of Lord Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary who most eloquently realized the unique bond between Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish identity. In 1919, Lord Balfour wrote in the introduction to the History of Zionism by Nahum Longman the following words. I can't read it in a British accent, but so the position of the Jews is unique. For them, race, religion, and country are interrelated, as they are interrelated in the case of no other race, no other religion, and no other country on earth. In no other case are the believers in one of the greatest religions of the world to be found, in parentheses, speaking broadly, only among the members of a single small people. In the case of no other religion is its past development so intimately bound up with the long political history of a petty territory wedged between states more powerful far than it could ever be. Of course, he didn't realize that Israel could emerge to be a powerful nation at that time. In the case of no other religion are the aspirations and hopes expressed in language and imagery so utterly dependent for their meaning on the conviction that only from this land, only through this one history, only by this one people, is full religious knowledge to spread through all the world. By a strange and most unhappy fate, it is this people of all others which, retaining the full its radical self-consciousness, has been severed from its home, has wandered into all lands, and has nowhere been able to create for itself an organized social commonwealth. So I said, when you read the above, I hope that you would agree that to tolerate anti-Zionism on our campuses is to accept anti-Semitism under the guise of freedom of expression of one's political views. And I don't know if I or anyone else could have put that, in a more powerful way, okay, that Balfour did in 1919. So I think that I'm spending, too much time. I'm probably running out of time unless I have about, just 5 more minutes about facts, disinformation, and lies. Is that one of the problems that we have, and I'm not a theorist in conflicts, except that when it's between molecules, that part of the problem that we're facing is that student groups, such as Student for Justice in Palestine, have promoted themselves as those representing oppressed people and teamed up with groups that also regard themselves as champions of oppressed minor groups, LGBTQ, BLM, and others. And so it creates a situation where it is all for one and one for all. In other words, the different groups share the same goal and support each other quest without questioning the validity of the arguments or accepting the disinformation that they have been provided, because they're together, okay? And without digging into factual details. And we suffer terribly, from, social media today, because the, Gen Z, okay, the Gen Z the generation, rely on quick pieces of information that comes up on your phone. You get it on Instagram, you get it on X, previously Twitter, and you don't go into the sort of original information, sources, or to look at verifiable information. And as a result, there's a lot of misinformation, and the problem is that once one gets into this mode, and it goes over and over and over again, it is very, very, very tough to basically educate yourself, because that disinformation is taken as truth, not just by the students, but also by some faculty for various reasons, okay? And so, what we have to, to realize is that, there is a pervasive approach, to teaching also with Israel studies, around the country. And Israel studies is fairly new, in terms of a discipline. It focuses on the conflict. And so people learn about the conflict and argue, is it real, is it not? And forgetting about really teaching about Israel, about what is this country, all about. And so I'll just give you one example. When I taught, when I was part of the Center for Israel Studies, I had various events. So I had an event at the 10-year anniversary to the disengagement from Gaza. And I wanted to teach, the UCLA students and faculty about it. So I didn't want to bring scholars that read about it and learn about it from books or analyze documents. So I brought to a special panel Brigadier General Eval Giladi, who is responsible for the disengagement plan from Gaza. I brought Dov Weissglass, who was the chief of staff of Ariel Sharon. He was involved in various, State of Israel, processes that drafted the roadmap for peace and the preparation for the Gaza, disengagement. And I also brought Gayeth Al-Omari, who is a senior fellow now at the Washington Institute, but he served as director of international relations in the office of the Palestinian president. And he was also advisor to former to the prime minister then, Mahmoud Abbas. And so the event was attended by Jewish and Muslim students, including my students from Saudi Arabia. I have students from Kuwait that attended, and everybody was just amazed at the level of similarity in understanding between Gayeth El-Omari and the Israeli sides, and understanding what really went on in Gaza. So the problem is that we're not really doing a lot of this, okay, today. And so there's a lot of disinformation, and the information is not coming from primary sources anymore. We don't teach about as much about Israeli culture, about Israeli technology, which I strive to do when I ran the center. To teach about Israel as a progressive democratic country that has made contributions in art, technological marvels, and contributions to the world in which we live. Some of you may know that USB drives emerged from Israel, that CAT scan technology, that Waze, which is now part of Google Maps, pharma by Teva, drip irrigation, advanced desalination engineering, the Iron Dome in collaboration with the US, SodaStream that you can buy here now, and of course, we gave the world Superwoman, right? Gal Gadot, and more. So in closing, the situation in Israel and the attitudes of nations and people around the world towards Israel and the Jewish nation is fluid. Anti-Israel and then anti-Semitism at UCLA campuses and across the U.S., unfortunately, are on the rise. So it's our responsibility to educate the next generation of thought leaders, decision makers, to become critical thinkers and not blindly follow, the antagonist to the point of no return. And that's my fear, is that once they're converted, it's very hard to get them back. And I don't believe that anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, will disappear anytime soon. But I strongly believe that Israel must be strong and stronger than ever. It must eradicate all hostile forces around its border that threaten its existence. And we have to be realistic. Our world respects, strength. and strength will allow democratic nations to establish order. That's what the U.S. has done. That's what other nations have done. Leading democracies did not form out of discussions or surrendering, their principles. They have formed with strength and resolve, and for Israel, it is now the swords of iron. Thank you.
Yes,